Unit 2, Video 3, trace the events that led to the American Revolution. Criticize or defend America's decision to go to war. Hey, there's the bad stuff that happened to the English. Looks like a lot more bad things happened to the American colonies, so obviously they're going to declare independence and go to war. Rising tension, they're not happy with each other. We've talked about this in the first two videos and even going back to Unit 1. So eventually the 13 colonies, which really at this time are 13 separate countries. They're not similar economically. They're not similar in beliefs. They are similar in that they're in the same continent and ruled by the same power, but they're not best friends and they're not like states today. So they have to convince each other to join together to fight against the oppressive power that was England. So, hey, we should team up against the king, start our own country. 13 colonies are stronger than one. Yes, obviously they're stronger than one, but do you really want to do this and fight the biggest power in the world? So when the ideas start to come together and, the writing's on the wall, you've got the Boston Massacre, you got the Boston Tea Party, we've got all these issues happening. Eventually, hey, we got to come together and talk about this. This will be the first Continental Congress. The continent will come together, sending their leaders from the different colonies and say, hey, all right, maybe we'll consider it. Let's talk about this first. So 12 of the representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies, not Georgia, because Georgia is in desperate need of the English because they're having American Indian problems. So they're not even going to think about showing up to this meeting like, hey, we can't abandon the English. They're helping us out right now. So 12 of the 13 colonies show up and we have a meeting to decide, hey, what are we going to do about this? We kind of need to work together. If we don't work together, we have no shot. So that's the first Continental Congress. Now, soon thereafter, we are going to have the issue at Lexington and Concord, the shot heard around the world. So the British are going to find out that, hey, the American colonists, they're thinking about some stuff. They're planning some stuff. Revolution seems like it is coming upon us. And if there's going to be a revolution, if there's going to be a war, then the British need to take the weapons away from the people. And that they hear is a stockpile of weapons here in Concord in Massachusetts, the Red Star. So the British are saying, hey, we got to go get these weapons from these crazy people. We've already seen what they've done before. We need to disarm them before things get worse. So they're going to go after the weapons. American spies find out about this and they alert the Minutemen, the colonists of, hey, the British are going to come steal your weapons. You probably ought to go hide those weapons. So the spies find out what's going to happen. They get the message to Paul Revere. Paul Revere then rides and alerts the Minutemen the British are coming or the regulars are coming, whichever you want to say, and alerts the Minutemen to get together in a minute's notice to stand up to the British, to stop the British, to prevent them from stealing the weapons. So the militia or the Minutemen get together and they will meet the British at Lexington first. So here is Concord, here is Lexington, here is Boston. The British arrive and they march and they will be confronted by the Minutemen at Lexington and the British will win this part. But boom, shot heard around a world. This is it. The war is now finally beginning. Not necessarily the Boston Massacre, not necessarily the Boston Tea Party, but this is where we have two organized armies fighting each other. The Minutemen, representing America, will fire against the British. And who fires first? We don't know who fires first, but we know that there was a shot heard around the world. Now, it's not literally heard around the world. It is figurative language that, hey, America's standing up to the British. They're fighting for a fair government. They're standing up for political beliefs. And people are like, well, what is democracy? What is that? And so now the world is abuzz. Not just that, hey, America's going to war, there's a fight. But the bigger idea is not that there's a fight between the little guy and the big guy. People care about the fight. But what is really interesting is that, what are they fighting about? Now the world is talking about democracy, the idea of democracy and people running the government and people ruling. That idea is spreading throughout the world. And spreading throughout the world where there are nothing but monarchies and dictators. And people around the world are starting to question their own governments for the first time because of America, the Minutemen, the shot heard around the world, and the First Continental Congress, and Lexington and Concord, and all these things will light the fire that will change the world forever. So then at Concord, so the British win at Lexington and they'll push forward to get those weapons at Concord. But at Concord, the British will be pushed back and the Minutemen will stand up to the British and the guns will be safe. The battle really doesn't matter, but what it symbolizes and what it signifies as the beginning of the American Revolution, and not just the American Revolution, but revolutions around the world. We take these ideas from the Enlightenment, which you would have studied in the world history, And these Enlightenment ideas are finally going to come into practice. They're going to be applied to real life situations for the first time. And that starts here. It's going to be the ideas of the philosophers are finally going to be tested and used and applied to real life. And it's going to start in America, and it's going to start in this moment. Shot heard around the world. Second Continental Congress. This would be the response to, well, remember the 12 of the 13 showed up and tried to figure out, what are we going to do? We got to kind of work together. But what do we do? Well, now the war has begun. It's over. The shots have been fired. We had the standoff. There's no going back now. So the Continental Congress will meet again. This is the second Continental Congress. And now they get to decide. We're not just talking anymore. There has to be action. Are we going to war? Are we going to declare independence? And they will decide in the second Continental Congress, yes, we're going to go to war. And it's crazy because England is the strongest nation in the world. It is absolutely insane, but these guys are insane, and they will vote and they will decide that war is going to be the decision. So Battle of Bunker Hill will be one of these soon battles thereafter. Again, up in New England. America will lose, but America proves like, hey, we're not just a bunch of nobodies. We are tough. They lose, but they do prove that they're going to be tough, and they prove that, all right, let's go for this. Maybe we can pull this thing off. We're not going to get completely slaughtered. Let's start talking about some of the documents. Trace the events, but really I want you to summarize the documents during the American Revolution. So if we look at what's going on between, let's look at the back of the baseball card, or the basketball card, or the stats. And the British, so America versus England, or the British, who's going to win? Well, the British have a trained professional army. We've got a bunch of Minutemen, militiamen, patriots. Now, our guys aren't trained. They're not experts, but they really want to win. They're fighting for their country, for their family, for their beliefs. They're really dedicated to the war. Whereas the British, they're just soldiers. I mean, they're the best, but do they care if they win or lose? It doesn't matter if you win this war or lose this war. You just don't want to die. And there's a lot more pros and cons listed in the study guide, which you can find on my website, but let's just go over some more. Britain had more money, obviously, but the Americans, this is a home game. We're playing on our home turf. We know the land. We're going to use that to our advantage. The British have a navy. We don't. That's kind of a big deal. The British have conquered the world. They own the world. It's not looking good. I mean, we are a major underdog. We really have no chance winning this war. And so if you think of it from that perspective, from the outset, from the beginning of the war, people were like, you sure we want to do this? Let's declare war on England. You know, they're only the strongest nation on earth. Imagine the government today said, hey, let's go fight like space aliens, right? We probably can't beat space aliens. They got spaceships. They got laser beams. They probably got stuff that's like 1,000 times stronger than nukes. And they say to you, hey, let's go fight the aliens that we have no chance at beating, and we're going to get slaughtered within seconds. Imagine the government knocking on your door. Hey, you want to go fight some aliens? You know what your answer is going to be? Yeah, I'm good. I'm going to play some video games. I got to get to work. I'm already running late. But maybe the guy down the street, he might like to fight the aliens. Not for me, but thanks for asking. And this is the same thing during the American Revolution. Hey, you want to go fight the British? Are you crazy? I don't want to go fight the British. So you've got to convince the people to do something that's really stupid. I mean, that's the truth. Hey, they have to persuade. And that's where Thomas Paine will come in with his pamphlet or book, which is one of the highest selling books of all time. Basically, and I'm not exaggerating, nearly every American read this. Today, not even every American can read. Back then, one of the strange, like often people think like, oh, people were so dumb back then. Actually, more people could read back then than they do today, or were more literate. So basically, almost every American had read this pamphlet. You have to persuade people to do something stupid, and he does a really good job. So it's a recruitment tool. So he will start with the basics. He will try to get in the basics, like, hey, let's think of this. Why do we even have government? So before Paine gets into convincing you to basically give your life for the country, he's like, oh, let's slow this down. Look, why do we even have governments? Let's go to a natural state of affairs. And when there was just a very few human beings on this planet, you didn't need a bunch of rules. If it was just like a family, you don't need rules. You don't need a government. And as civilization grew and there's more families, you still didn't need a government. We just had like 10, 20, 30 people, but we do need some rules, right? So we got our group together. We don't need a government. We don't need an organization, but we're going to need some rules that we all follow. This is kind of how the natural state of affairs evolved. But then as more and more people were on the earth and the groups got bigger and bigger and bigger, they realized that, yeah, we need rules, but we're also going to need an organization or a government to enforce these rules. This is how naturally governments or governmental organizations were formed. That's how we will eventually end up at a king. That's how you eventually end up with democracies or whatever form of government. It started with not needing one. And then, well, you need some rules. And then it's like, whoa, we got too many people. And how do I make sure these people are not doing stupid stuff? How do I make sure these people aren't killing me? How do I make sure people aren't killing each other and robbing each other? How do we make sure that people are following rules? Well, we got to write rules. Who's going to enforce the rules? We need a government. And that's what Paine will say, like, look, it's a necessary evil, keyword evil. No one wants a boss. Do you want a boss? Do you want to give someone power that's going to rule over you? I don't. No one does. Hey, let's make ourselves follow a bunch of rules. I don't want to follow a bunch of rules, but guess what? I want other people to follow the rules. And so here is the necessary evil, Paine says, is that, look, no one wants a boss, but everyone wants everyone else to have a boss. I don't want a boss, but I want a boss telling you what to do. I want a boss telling you what to do. I know, but the thing is, if I create the boss, he's probably going to be bossing me around. And that's what the government is. It's necessary evil, people. And so that's what he explains at the very beginning. And then he questions, all right, so we have to have a government. But is this government that we have, is this monarchy, is this king the best one? Can't we do better? We got to have something, but is this the best one? And so then he starts breaking it down. Look, England, tiny.
Please call the front office, Miss Fox. Please call 4120. Thank you.
England is a tiny little island. We're a giant continent. Does that make sense? It's not common sense, people. It is common sense that we make our own rules and we're not ruled by a tiny little island. Common sense. Use your brain. Hey, it's common sense. They're 3,000 miles away. Why are they making laws? Why are they ruling us? Use your brain, people. It's common sense. We should be calling our own shots. The king makes laws that help out the British, and he makes out laws that hurt the American colonists. It's common sense. Why would we let him keep making laws? Every law that he makes helps the English, the British, and it hurts us. It's common sense that we just start our own country and we make our own laws that help us out. And then our second document, and that really persuades a lot of the American people. As I said, almost all of the Americans read it. Thomas Jefferson will write the Declaration of Independence July 4th, 1776. It'll get signed. He'll have help from John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, but he is the main author of it. And there are four major points in the Declaration of Independence. Number one, we declare our independence. We break up from England. Cool. It's easy to remember that one. Number two, he says that all men are created equal. And we still live by that principle today. I know you're saying, Thomas Jefferson's a liar. He had slaves. I get it. He did. But here's the thing, folks. It's one thing to have an ideal, something you're living up to. But here's the reality. Often we don't live up to them. And he obviously didn't live up to them. And our government didn't live up to it. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist as an ideal. It doesn't exist as our dream. It does not mean it's not our goal. It's our goal. We just haven't reached it. We're still working there. These are goals. A lot of these are goals. Government ideals. Doesn't mean the day that you come up with this dream doesn't mean it happens then. You work your way towards it. You understand that. All people are treated equal under the law. All the laws treat people equally. Number three, the idea of unalienable rights, or rights you are born with, rights that cannot be taken away. Government cannot take them away, and the government must protect these. Basically, we just rip off John Locke. We talked about him in the last video. Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence just straight plagiarizes John Locke, but then changes it a little bit. He says, remember, Locke said the government has to protect your unalienable rights, your rights that cannot be taken away. The government must protect your life, they must protect your liberty, and the government must take your property. So Jefferson's like, well, I'm going to steal this, and I'm going to change it to pursuit of happiness so I can call it my own. And that's in the Declaration of Independence. The reason we have a government, remember we talked about with Thomas Paine how governments get formed and grow, and now we have these governments, and this government that exists has one job, and it is to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. End of story. Not to do all this other nonsense. And then the fourth thing, or major point or takeaway in the Declaration of Independence, July 4, 1776, are grievances or complaints. These are the problems we have with the king. So in this document, we're declaring our independence from the king. And in that, we're saying all men are created equal, king. You got to do that. You're not doing that, so we're going to do it our own way. We have rights that should be protected. You're not doing that, so we're going to do it our own way. Oh, and by the way, we got 27 complaints that we need to tell you about. Dear King, you're a tyrant. You've taken our right to trial. You've unfairly taxed us. You removed our representative government. You have a standing army during peacetime, etc. 27 times. It's kind of like a breakup letter, if you really want to understand. Dear King, you know, I'm breaking up with you. Your breath stinks. You smell. Your jokes aren't funny. You name it. So that's kind of what it is. It's a breakup letter, but more of a historical one in between nations and not boyfriends and girlfriends. What are the 4 parts? Little game here you want to play. So look for independence, equality, unalienable rights, and grievances. Well, obviously, there's independence. There is your example of one of the major components in our breakup letter. The whole thing, that's the grievances. So we've taken care of independence and the grievances. And what about equality? You think you're more important to me. Your boyfriend or girlfriend thinks they are more important to you. So that means that they are not equal to you. They have more rights. They have more power. All men are created equal. Boyfriends and girlfriends are equal and should be treated equally. And you should treat your boyfriend or girlfriend equal to you. And they should treat you equally. There should not be one that has more power than the other. The king should not have more power. The king should be equal under the law. All the laws that you follow should be the same that the king follows or the president follows. And then you never stood up for me. You didn't protect my unalienable rights. So there is a breakup letter to your boyfriend or girlfriend that is basically the same exact thing as the Declaration of Independence. Second Continental Congress will sign the Declaration of Independence, and it will be on. The war will begin. Send the letter over. Let's get this thing rolling. You guys are crazy. Definitely going to get demonetized for that one. Doesn't matter. I'm not making any money off these things anyway.